So what I'm going to speak about is also sort of how we go about using data when we are programming events and festivals at Paytm Insider. We are primarily a ticketing platform for large-scale concerts and festivals that I'm sure many of you know about Insider, and we've spoken about Insider in the last couple of sessions as well. We all have this challenge of growing the market. It's just not about us growing in the events market per se. It's also about growing the market itself, because this market is pretty much a sort of latent demand market, I would say, where people are not really there to spend money on events or festivals, and it's pretty much a sort of a metro or niche pockets phenomena. And a lot of times that is why we also have to work like Insider also as a co-promoter or a stakeholder. We also work towards programming and orchestrating a lot of these events to generate demand. While we do this, there are data decisions to be taken about programming, about pricing, a lot of such things. And quite sometimes these decisions are based on structured data, or we are knowingly using data to come up with these decisions. But a lot of times these are not, it is unknowingly done, right? Like we don't have structured data or tables that are telling us this is so and so, but there is experiential data. Here in this session, I'm going to talk about how we typically go about the first part, which is structured data, which is coming from tools, which is coming from your own website and so on, and how we use that to sort of drive some of these decisions. So I'm going to talk about how we do it in a physical event first, and then briefly, if we have time, I'll speak about how it is slightly different in the, not very, but slightly different in the digital events space. Starting with what is the first question that we have in programming is typically, who are we programming? For example, if I'm doing a music event in a particular city or so on, what artist am I bringing onto this platform? So a lot of times we are not the decision makers in this, but when we are, as a ticketing partner or as a co-promoter, we look at typically the primary data, we look at trends, we look at the relevance of this particular artist compared to some other artist, and then the precedence. By precedence, I mean the history that we have with that artist or some other platform for that matter has with programming that artist and so on. When I talk about trends, the most easily accessible sort of way to assess trends is looking at Google search trends. That's what a lot of us usually do. So I'll speak about this tool that Google Trends called Google Trends, which helps you analyze this later as we go along. And a lot of times it is primary data. So from time to time, we reach out to our email audience or do social media surveys and stuff to understand what kind of person or what kind of artist do they see sort of they want programmed in their city or wherever they're coming from. And then we look at this data and see like what kind of cities have what kind of demand and so on, do a demand mapping, and then have these sort of things ready. So whenever we have the opportunity, we have this data ready with us that these are the artists that we should look at, and that should be relevant in the time that we're looking also. The next question is, what are we programming? So decisions regarding once you finalize the artist or whoever you want to program, what are the sort of which cities are you picking? I think some of the questions also came around this thing. What kind of venues are you picking in these cities? What ticketing structure, what capacities are we talking about, and so on. The first step that we go about doing is gathering data, right, about the artists that we are programming and so on. So this comes from fan data, which is coming from all the social media platforms that typically the artist is present in. There is search trends, what I was talking about, and I mentioned Google Trends briefly. And then there are paid tools which help you aggregate these sort of the top level, the fan data, etc., in case you don't have access to that thing. And then as a ticketing platform, I have my own website, and I have my own website with the data. Similarly, if one of your sort of festivals or the companies that you run, if you have your websites, then there are ways to understand your audience in depth, which is not just limited to your sort of location and stuff, your demographics and stuff, but a bit more about their spending abilities and all those things. So Spotify typically gives you information about the listener data for a particular artist, what kind of cities, what are the top cities that these artists sort of have people listening to their music from, what are the demographic data around this, followers. One important thing to look at is a follower conversion. So how sticky is this artist come from seeing, compared to number of people who are listening, how many of them are actually following. And the last and the most important thing I would say is growth trends. Don't look at data just like the number and see, just also look at the growth trend. If this artist is gaining popularity over the recent times and so on. Similarly, if you look at the social media platforms and YouTube, they give you all these kinds of information. This is the dashboard that you see typically for an Instagram account. If you have a sort of professional account, you will see the visitors, the followers, subscribers, their demographic data, locations, but what percentage of your sort of people who are coming and watching your videos and so on are premium users, device types, what kind of device are they logging in or watching from, engagement rates, what is the like and share and subscribe and all those things, and growth trends. So if you are programming someone and say you are talking to this artist and bringing them to do this tour with you or so on, you can reach out to the artist manager. That's the most effective way to get this data from them itself, to understand and to have your sort of inferences from it. In case you're not able to get that, there are paid tools which help you sort of get this data aggregated. So there are tools like Chartmetric and sound charts and everything. So what is Google Trends? Google Trends is Google's free tool. If you search Google Trends, you will see it, where you can see what kind of search hits come over a timeline. Say, if you want to look up the data for last 1 month, 12 months, 5 years, you get this data. And from what areas, geography wise and everything, in particular countries or all over the world and so on, and within categories and all that. So here, what you see, there are two graphs. One is for Yohani, that is a blue line. And then there's Pavandeep Rajan, who was the Indian Idol winner this year. So if you see a spike in the sort of searches for Pavandeep Rajan, right? And then it kind of, I would say, died out. Whereas Yohani kind of peaked around the same time. And her peak is half as good as Pavandeep's peak. I think Pavandeep's peak would be around the time that he was the finale of the Indian Idol and so on. Her trend is more sort of sustainable. Similarly, Google Trends also helps you understand where the searches are coming from which parts of the country, for example, and so on. It is quite intuitive, but when you're taking decisions about where to program, etc., you stitch all this data together and then you take your inference, right? And then there's a website data. So there's a tool called Google Analytics. I'm sure some of you would be familiar about Google Analytics, which is a simple sort of, you have to enter a small code snippet onto your website, and then it will sit and tell you everything about your users who are coming onto your website. So as I mentioned, it will help you understand user data. It will help you understand where you're acquiring users from, what pages are you acquiring users from on your website, what is bringing in the traffic. Like a platform like me, for a marketplace like Insider, I have various kinds of events. So I can understand what kind of events are driving the traffic organically, what kind of categories of events are driving the traffic organically. And then I can see where else can I plug the traffic into, what can I market to them, looking at the sort of commonalities and all that. And also the behavior of the people on the website, like I mentioned, and conversion rates. When I say conversion rate, how many people are, if there are 1,000 people visiting your website or a particular page, how many of them are converting and doing whatever you define as your conversion. It can be payment, it can be a sign up. It is up to you to define what the conversion exactly is for your website. Now you have collected all this information from various places. Now the question is, how are you really gonna make sense of this data? So what we do typically is we look at our past data, compare what we find from the new data, and then try to infer things from that. While we're looking at data, one thing I would specifically sort of emphasize is on not ignoring trends. I've taken an example here. There's something I came across recently when I was looking for this. So there are two music. One is an artist, Anuv Jain, who was recently trending on Spotify, etc. And then there is Local Train, right? Local Train is a band. Now, if I look at the numbers, the green is the Spotify following numbers. The purple is the Instagram numbers. So if you see Spotify, if I'm looking at Local Train, they are like 5 times that of Anuv Jain, right? If I look at just this data and decide if I had to make a choice of who to program, I might pick Local Train naturally. But then I look at the trend data. See, so this is very interesting. So the yellow line is Anuv Jain and the red line that you see is Local Train. So over the last 12 months, Anuv Jain has a tremendous growth path, and it is not sort of stopping. Like the trend line, the sort of the graph is very sort of increasing at a steep rate. Whereas Local Train, while they have been in the sort of popularity ranks, they are sort of they're not growing beyond that. So if I take this data, say 7 months from now or 12 months from now, these numbers might be very comparable, like what we see for Anuj Jain and Local Train today on this graph, on the top graph. This graph would be in a very different shape if this growth trend is to be sort of continued. Similarly, the bottom graph is a Spotify listener numbers. You can say they started off similar last year, but now this Anuj Jain is like almost 2.5x that of the sort of previous artist. So if I'm gonna take a call now to program 3 months from now or later, this will be a parameter that I'll take into account, right? I'll also be probably betting more or feeling safer to bet on Anuj Jain. I'm not comparing these two artists or saying anything about their music, but purely data, if I'm looking at and programming, then these things cannot be ignored. So don't look at numbers in silos, don't look at your data in silo, always do comparison, see trends, and also compare with the previous data and whatever you have to make sense of it. Now you've figured all this data, whatever you know, now the next step is to design for the audience. So one important thing that we look at is how do we identify the spending power of the audience. We look at data proxies typically to understand if a particular sort of audience is a premium audience or a sort of non-premium audience and so on. So some of the proxies that we use are device information. For example, what percentage of users are premium phone users? It can be iPhones or sort of premium smartphones in Android and so on. What percentage of people are premium users on YouTube and other platforms? Where in what other places do they spend their money? So that will help you, again, with benchmarking, help you understand if you are designing for a premium audience or not. Once all this is done and you have sort of arrived at some sort of a pricing plan and programming plan and everything, it's time to test the waters. So what we typically do is looking at doing some surveys and sign up campaigns and everything before the event actually goes live.